Channel 2's Sports Zone Signing Day starts now.
Yes, today is the day. National Signing Day is happening right now. Georgia's top players are signing letters of intent and making it official where they will play next fall. Good afternoon and welcome to Channel 2's Sports Zone Signing Day, brought to you by our friends at Montlick & Associates. I'm Sports Director Zach Klein along with Anthony Amy.
And we have crews spread all across Metro Atlanta. Joining us here on set, former Georgia and Atlanta Falcons quarterback DJ Shockley.
Looking forward to see you throughout the show, my friend. We also have AJC recruiting expert Michael Carvel. He will join us live with a breakdown of the top recruits, plus our Chuck Dowdle and our Van Earl Wright will check in from Georgia and Georgia Tech, respectively.
And they will help tell you who's in line to potentially become maybe the next Nick Chubb, who's headed out of state and who has everyone waiting right now for that decision.
Yeah, we want to hear your thoughts at home about this class for 2015. Check out SZ on 2 on Twitter for updates all day long. Now we start this afternoon with one decision that will impact the Georgia Bulldogs and the Auburn Tigers for the next few years. Wide receiver Darius Slayton from Greater Atlanta Christian verbally committed to the University of Georgia about a month ago. But as we know, guys, in recruiting, a lot can change within a month. And it did. Last night, he decommitted from Georgia and verbally committed to the Auburn Tigers. And this morning, on the GAC campus, he made it official when he signed his national letter of intent. It's believed former Georgia offensive coordinator Mike Bobo's departure from Athens had a big impact on Slayton's switch. Combine that with the fact he had some family ties to Auburn, and it's the Tiger faithful who will be rooting for Slayton over the next few years and not the Bulldog Nation. Darius Slayton ranked as the 16th best player in the state, though some talent evaluators believe he has first-round NFL draft potential. Our Anthony Amy was at GAC this morning to talk with Mr. Slayton.
Darius, you made the switch late last night from what we understand. Just give me an indication as to why you decided to switch from Georgia to Auburn.
Well, first off, I'd like to say thank you to the University of Georgia. There's a great group of guys over there, Coach Rick, Coach Pruitt, all those guys. They do a great job, and I just really appreciate them for giving me the opportunity. But it just, you know, a lot of people say follow your heart. So my heart was in Auburn ultimately, and that's what it just came down to.
So now you prepare to go to one of Georgia's biggest rivals, and you're playing for Coach Malzahn. And clear this up for us, which position do you plan on playing? Because obviously you were very good at receiver as well as defensive back. So what's your primary position going to be with the Tigers?
I'm going to play wide receiver at Auburn.
And playing for someone like Gus Malzahn, seeing the numbers that offense put up, what do you envision for yourself in the Plains?
Hopefully just an opportunity to make plays, and I'm going to do the best with the opportunities they give me.
How much did looking at the personnel there, I know Sammy Coates is one that's moving on to the next level. How much did looking at the personnel and seeing the opportunity for playing time factor into the decision?
It definitely factored in. You know, having the opportunity to play early and play often is something that played into my decision. And you know, they have a great situation over there for me to come into, so I'm ready and I'm excited.
All right, give us a War Eagle for us as we head out.
War Eagle.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. We now welcome in Michael Carvel from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And Michael, give us, will you, a little backstory here. How did Slayton end up at Auburn after verbally committing to Georgia just a few weeks ago?
Yeah, Zach, this has been the craziest signing day I can ever remember for the University of Georgia. And it should have been an omen last night when Darius Slayton switched after being committed to the Bulldogs for around maybe 6 weeks. I think what happened there is Georgia lost a little bit of footing, but not much when Mike Bobo left for Colorado State. It was enough to make Darius Slayton think things over again, and when he had that little pause, Auburn was taking family connection. Darius's uncle was a linebacker at Auburn, and he grew up an Auburn fan watching his uncle play. I'm sorry, it was his cousin. So when they had that opening, Auburn took advantage of it, and wow, what a shocker. Darius Slayton, who everybody thought was a UGA bound, he is headed to Auburn University. Although he tweeted last night it was the University of Auburn. I know those kids are under pressure.
Yeah, that they are, Michael. I appreciate your time, and we'll definitely check in with you throughout the show. Now will one of the state's 5-star recruits join Slayton at Auburn? or will he head to Athens? That's a question many fans have right now, awaiting the decision of Callaway's Terry Godwin. The 6-foot star from Hogansville is ranked by some recruiting services as the top athlete in the country. Godwin could play both offense and defense in college, at wide receiver and in the secondary. He verbally committed to the University of Georgia over a year ago, but as we just saw with Slayton, verbal commitments, they're not binding, folks. What matters is when they sign a national letter of intent. Godwin recently told Michael Carvel he's 100% with Georgia, but he also told him he would make his final decision today. On the last 2 weeks, Godwin hung out at Nick Saban's house, checking out his pool. Also had in-home visits from Georgia head coach Mark Richt and Auburn head coach Gus Malzahn. And while he could sign anywhere, again, most believe it's coming down to either Georgia or Auburn for Godwin's services. We welcome back in Michael Carvel from the AJC. Michael, again, Godwin verbally committing over a year ago to the Bulldog Nation, but now there's maybe a little of a slim chance, a decent chance for that matter, that he could play elsewhere. What happened, and can you give us your prediction on where you think he is going to go?
You know, right now, it's around 1 o'clock Eastern time. I think he's going to Georgia. In the next 10 minutes, it could change. This is another crazy recruiting story. He committed to the Bulldogs around a year ago, but he continued to flirt with Auburn and Alabama. And what really got people worried was that Auburn's Gus Malzahn made 2 trips to Godwin's house and high school last weekend while Auburn recruits were on campus to see Terry Godwin. So you know he's a priority by Auburn then. But the reason I think Georgia holds on here is because the Bulldogs signed his older sister to a basketball scholarship last summer. And to me, I think that locked the deal.
So the sibling on campus, that always matters at least a little bit. It has to, right? Well, DJ Shockley joins us now. Speaking of recruiting, he would certainly be the one to know. And Chris Conley, Michael Bennett, both graduated. So Malcolm Mitchell actually is the only returning wideout who had more than 11 catches last season. So obviously one of the Bulldogs' biggest needs is at receiver. We saw Slayton is now heading to Auburn. It's possible Terry Godwin now joins him there. How devastating a blow would it be to your Bulldogs if they lose out on Godwin too?
I think it's quite devastating because you talk about Slayton leaving, and now Godwin having a chance to go to the University of Georgia would be huge. But you talk about Malcolm Mitchell, he still is kind of a unknown. He hasn't played a full season at the University of Georgia yet, so you got to have some guys in place who can come in and play. And I think Godwin and Slayton are both guys who can come in and play right now if they had to as a freshman. And losing a guy like Godwin, you already lost Slayton, so losing a guy like Godwin would be a huge blow to the University of Georgia, especially when they've had a lot of decommitments. I think they had 8 decommitments, and 3 of them have been wide receivers. So they are needed at the position, especially you don't want to lean too much on the run game for next year, but you got to have some receivers who can catch the ball and make some plays. And Godwin is a guy who can do that.
All right, Shock, thanks for checking on that. We'll check in with you definitely throughout the show. Now, while we await on Terry Godwin's decision, we know now where another one of the state's top players is headed, and it's a surprise. Linebacker. Roquan Smith, making his decision earlier. At least that's what we think he's doing, right?
Yeah, we thought he was going to be headed to UGA as well. But Montezuma's own Roquan Smith, ranked as the state's 5th best linebacker in the country by some recruiting services. He did not verbally commit to a school, but after considering UCLA, Texas A&M, Michigan, Georgia, and Southern Cal, Smith picked UCLA today on ESPNU, so he'll head to Beverly Hills to play for former Falcons head coach Jim Mora and the Bruins.
I just wanted to get out, do my own thing, experience something different. The education there speaks for itself, one of the top public schools in America, and just to go out, grow up on my own and just experience something different. I think Coach Orbrick, the staff out there, can develop me into what I want to be, and it just felt like home.
Up next, folks, we head to Albany and home to what some recruiting services call the top-ranked recruit in the U.S. Defensive tackle Trent Thompson spent his high school career feasting on opposing quarterbacks for Westover High School in southwest Georgia. He's 6'3", 313 pounds, racking up 84 tackles his senior season, including 36 for a loss. He tallied 21 sacks during his high school playing days. A 5-star recruit, was a 2015 U.S. Army All-American Bowl selection. USA Today naming him the National Defensive Player of the Year, and he was All-State, of course, here in Georgia. As for his future plans, well, the top-ranked player in the country will be a Bulldog. Thompson committing to the University of Georgia back in August, and although he took a few other official visits, he stuck with his pledge and signed with the Dogs today. Will make quite an addition to Jeremy Pruitt's defense.
And right now, we'd like to get the take of AJC recruiting expert Michael Carvel on Big Trent Thompson.
Yes, Michael, there are so many great players here in Georgia and, of course, nationwide. So how did Thompson end up ranked #1 in the land by some of these recruiting services?
These receivers and these running backs and cornerbacks, these receivers, these running backs, these cornerbacks, they are a dime a dozen, but it's very rare to find defensive linemen who are 6'3", 300 pounds. And Trent Thompson, what the scouts love about him is that he's a 300-pounder that runs like a 200-pounder. And if there are two guys in this 2015 class from the state of Georgia who are going to the NFL that I would say right now, it would be Trent Thompson and Mitch Hyatt, the offensive tackle from North Gwinnett, who is headed to Clemson. And both these guys, you know what? They are not drama queens. They both committed early, stuck to their word, and recruiting's over with them. But, hey, these other guys, the drama queens, they make it all interesting for us, I guess.
All right, so a rarity indeed, having that big 6'3", 300-pounder heading to Athens as the #1 player, #1 offensive lineman, or defensive lineman rather, in the country. And DJ Shockley rejoins us now. And Shock, Trent Thompson obviously has the talent and now heads to Georgia. Defensive line coach Tracy Rocker, associate head coach, gets to mold quite a talent. Will Thompson make an impact this season as a true freshman for the Bulldogs?
I would say absolutely yes. You look at what they lost. They lost Ray Drew. They lost Thorne. They lost also Big Thorne up front, Toby Johnson. They got a couple key guys up front that they're missing. He has to come in and play a key role. He has a great first step, plays with a lot of energy. He's quick, he's fast. He has those quick twitch muscles. You usually don't hear that on a D lineman, but he has a quick twitch muscle that makes him fast and elusive about the ball, and he makes plays with his hands. So I think he will come in and make a huge impact early for the University of Georgia defense, just because they lost so many guys and they need a big guy of his size to come in and make some plays.
And we've seen some of the top #1 overall recruits in the country the last few years in the D-line making an immediate impact. Obviously, Robert Kimdichie coming out of Grayson High School. Jadeveon Clowney was the #1 overall player. And those guys right away in college, you know, I guess if you're D-line, you're athletic and big and fast, that's a good recipe to cause some havoc.
And Georgia's known for putting out some big defensive linemen. You go back all the way to Big Seymour, you got Stroud, you got of late Geno Atkins. I mean, you got some guys coming from the University of Georgia that has played at a high level at the defensive line position. And I think he's going to fall into that same mold of big-time players making plays and starting and playing early.
All right, Chuck, we'll check in with you in just a bit. You know, Thompson isn't the only Georgia high school player who will be looking to give Jeremy Pruitt's defense a big boost in Athens for the next few years. 4 of the state's top defensive ends will all suit up and play for the Bulldogs as well. Tucker's Jonathan Ledbetter ranked as the 8th best player in Georgia this past season after brutalizing offensive lines in the state's largest classification. He originally committed to Alabama and Nick Saban, but he changed his mind after his older brother joined the Bulldog football team following a few seasons of NCAA Division II basketball. Ledbetter is an early enrollee, meaning he's already graduated from Tucker and is at UGA right now taking classes. Joining Ledbetter in Athens is Mays' Natrez Patrick. He enrolled in classes in January as well. Patrick was the 10th ranked player in the state and helped lead Mays to the state championship game this past season. Now, Patrick could be a player, folks, in a few positions for the Bulldogs that can make an immediate impact and will likely spend some time at the linebacker position. Langston Hughes' DeAndre Walker had 21 sacks as a junior. He followed that up with another 23.5 sacks as a senior. That's amazing. You know, throw in 10 forced fumbles, and it's easy to see why the Bulldog staff wanted him in Athens. Walker played in the U.S. Army All-American Bowl, and he was the 6A Player of the Year in Region 3. Walker will join Ledbetter and Patrick as members of the Bulldogs 2015 class. And how about Stevenson's Chauncey Rivers? He's going to head to Athens as well. The 4-star defensive end originally committed to South Carolina, but changed his mind about a year ago. He called Georgia his dream school. That dream now realized. Rivers will play for the Bulldogs after signing his national letter of intent this morning. All
right, so DJ Shockley rejoins us. There's certainly a lot of firepower now to add to that defensive side of the football for the Bulldogs, who really improved under Jeremy Pruitt at the end of last season. Pruitt showed that he's not afraid to play true freshmen. I mean, Dominic Sanders, for one, comes to mind, played very well, 2 interceptions in the Belk Bowl. How do you see these guys helping, and will any of them help the Bulldogs in 2015? You already mentioned Thompson. Will, what about the guys that Zach just mentioned?
Another guy to add to that list is Lorenzo Carter.
Yes.
Came in as a freshman, had 4 or 5 sacks. He did an outstanding job. But all those guys have a collection of things they can do really well. You talk about Natrez Patrick can be all around the field. He can play linebacker. You're going to need that. You're missing Ramik Wilson. You're also losing Amalo Herrera, who both led the SEC last couple of years in tackles. So both those guys are gone. You're going to need some guys to fill their void. All those guys are fast. They can get up the field. They can make plays, and they can run. And that's what you need in SEC, especially with all these running backs, and they spread you out. You need guys who can stay on the field for 3 downs and be able to rush the passer and also getting coverage. And I think all 3 of those guys had that ability.
Let's now bring back in Michael Carvel. Michael, Georgia had a great morning for signing day, picking up 4 commitments, including Westlake's Daquan Hawkins and Kirby Choates of Tri-Cities. But the Bulldogs missed out on the big fish, Macon County's Roquan Smith, picking UCLA over Georgia in that situation. What happened right there?
Yeah, Zach, I knew you couldn't make it through one show without mentioning Robert Kimdichi's name. I mean, that has to be your all-time favorite player. I guess it's mine. But and Anthony, you're celebrating Roquan Smith going to UCLA, but guess what? He hasn't signed the papers yet. It's the biggest story in recruiting right now. So, as you mentioned, he committed on ESPN. He's the linebacker from Macon County. Everybody thought he was going to Georgia. He committed to UCLA, but guess what? He did not sign the papers. I don't know what's going to happen with this over the next few hours. Is he going to go to UCLA? Is he going to switch his mind and go to Georgia? It's just a crazy situation. Like a few years ago, I don't know if you remember Josh Harvey Clemens. He committed on TV to Georgia on signing day on ESPN, and his father or his grandfather would not sign off on his letter of intent because I think he wanted him to go to Florida. So never a boring moment in recruiting.
Yeah, never a boring moment. And again, for those who may have just actually logged on, Michael Carvel saying that Roquan Smith, whom on national television said he was going to UCLA, has not signed the papers as of yet. So, again, you never know. Well, one receiver who did not get away from the Bulldogs is Jason Stanley, the 6'2", 200-pound Creekside Seminole receiver, tore his ACL in the first game of his senior season, but the Bulldogs told Stanley they still wanted him. Stanley did take a late trip to UCF, that's Central Florida, but he did indeed sign with the Bulldogs on this day. So, who else is headed to Athens? How about Marist's Sage Harden ranking as the 50th best offensive tackle in the country? He no doubt has plenty of run blocking experience playing at the Atlanta area private school, but may have to spend some time working on his pass pro. Harden had offers from several other ACC and SEC schools, but the 6'7" blocker follows in the footsteps of offensive tackle Kendall Baker, who signed with Georgia out of Marist last year. Lakeside High School's Rashad Roundtree ranked as the 5th best safety in America while playing for the Augusta area school. His strengths include his range, skills and run support and physical play. Roundtree had offers from the biggest SEC and ACC schools, took official visits to both Georgia and national champion Ohio State. Grayson's Justin Young, verbally committed to the Bulldogs back in March, made it official today. The 6'3.5" defensive tackle will learn from one of the best to do it himself. We mentioned D-line coach, associate head coach Tracy Rocker. Young played defensive end on the offensive line, tight end, and fullback for the Rams over the course of the season, and his dad is former NFL linebacker Andre Young. Here are a few more Georgia Bulldogs. Daquan Hawkins, Zach mentioned him a moment ago, helped Westlake's Lions get their first taste of success in the state playoffs. Tay Crowder was going to Georgia Southern, but instead received a late invitation from Athens, so he will be a Bulldog. Sam Madden coming south from New Jersey, and Pat Allen Franklin is another new toy for a new O-line coach, Rob Sale, to tutor.
Yeah, Anthony, it's been quite a busy day for the Bulldogs in Athens. Many fans made their way to the Butts-Mehre building there to cheer on the Dogs. They've been roaring and barking as each new national letter of intent arrived. Channel 2's Chuck Dowdle is there as well. He's monitoring all of the signing day action for us. Good afternoon, Chuck.
National Signing Day for college football across the country. That is huge, but believe me, it's bigger nowhere than right here in Athens, Georgia, where head coach Mark Richt stepped in front of a big crowd of Georgia football fans to tell them how the day had gone for the Dogs.
I do think there's a lot of good news on the way today. I'm sure not everything's going to go exactly the way we hope, but a lot of very positive things I think are on the way. The number, you know what? I don't know what the number's going to end up being. We're going to find out.
And the paperwork will continue to come in here at the University of Georgia throughout the day. In fact, by the end of the day, it's expected that the Dogs will have a class somewhere between 25 and 30 signees. And the class should be ranked, once again, as has become almost the norm under head coach Mark Richt, in the national top 10. In Athens with the Georgia Bulldogs, I'm Chuck Dowdle for Action Sports.
All right, Chuck, thanks as always. And let's bring back in Michael Carvel of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Michael, give us those final thoughts on this year's Bulldogs recruiting class.
I mean, final thoughts. You heard Mark Richt right there. He sounded clueless. Who knows how all this stuff is going to unfold? You got 4 guys out there right now. You got Nick Buchanan. He's going to decide between Florida and Georgia at 2. You have Van Jefferson. He was committed to Georgia, switched to Ole Miss, and now he may go back to Georgia. And the big one, of course, at 6 p.m. is Terry Godwin. He's the 5-star who's been committed to Georgia for a year but could flip to Auburn. So I can't give you final thoughts right now. All I can tell you is you'll probably see me somewhere in Buckhead tonight after all this stress. What a crazy day, guys.
Nobody drops some knowledge like Michael Carvel. We appreciate that. Speaking of someone who's got some knowledge, is a man who played the game on the college level and, of course, in the NFL with the Falcons, DJ Shockley, once again joining us. Let's talk about these players, DJ, in Athens. They might have their impact next year, moving forward, and over the course of their college careers. You like what you see so far?
I do. I think it's a well-rounded group. They got guys at all different spots, especially defense, where they know they have to show up a lot of things defensive front-wise. And if you get Godwin in here, that's going to solidify some things offensively. I remember going back when my recruiting class, we had Thomas Davis, we had David Pollock, we had Greg Blue. We had a lot of quality guys who made a lot of plays for us. And I think this is going to be another class to look for another 2 or 3 years. I'm going to say this is a productive class that started to play early and played often.
Much more from DJ coming up on our show on WSBTV.com. Signing Day Extraordinaire. First, though, we're going to check in with Herschel Walker. DJ, #1 recruiting guy of all time. Herschel Walker had to be number 2 for Georgia. But why did he not want to go to Georgia, and what changed his mind? You will hear from Herschel Walker coming up.
And we will check in on the Orange Bowl champion Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Who's headed to the Flats to play, and what impact will they have? We'll show you coming up.
Sports Zone Signing Day is brought to you by Montlick & Associates, proud sponsor of the Montlick & Associates Athlete of the Week, profiling Georgia's top student athletes.
All right, 12 players at Greater Atlanta Christian signed a national letter of intent this morning. Coach Tim Hardy's squad made it all the way to the state championship game this season, and it is very much a success paying off for those young men. Congratulations to all dozen Spartans. I had the pleasure of being there this morning, and families were enjoying it. It was a great day for the young men and their families, for sure. All right, welcome back to Sports Zone Signing Day here on WSBTV.com. Montlick & Associates, our presenting sponsor, and they also honored 11 players during the regular season as the Athlete of the Week.
That's right. Each week, one of the standouts represented in the field and in the community. Let's take a look back at the Montlick & Associates Athlete of the Week to see where they are headed next.
Nick Wilson spent the season at Milton High School blocking for one of the most explosive running attacks in the state. When he wraps up his senior year, he'll head out west to Stanford to play college ball. Mitch Hyatt spent the last few years blocking the state's best defensive ends from his spot on the offensive line for one of the state's best programs, North Gwinnett. Hyatt ranked as the second best high school player in the state and has already enrolled at Clemson. Sandy Creek running back Eric Swinney topped 1,800 yards as a senior and over 4,000 yards during his career in Tyrone. Add in nearly 70 touchdowns, and it is no wonder his future is in the SEC. Swinney is headed to Ole Miss. North Oconee's Kawan Bryant rushed for 2,148 yards and 28 touchdowns this season. He also racked up 98 touchdowns in his career. Bryant heads to Georgia Military College, where he hopes to spend a few seasons before transferring to a big-time program. Cherokee's Andrew Harris was named the Montlick & Associates Athlete of the Year. That is because he led the state in receiving yards, his team back to the playoffs for only the 8th time in school history, and all of his contributions to the Cherokee community. Harris decided Samford University was the place for him. Congratulations to Andrew and all of our deserving athletes this year.
Congratulations, folks. Who else was named a Montlick & Associates Athlete of the Week this past season? Well, the previously discussed Terry Godwin from Callaway. He'll make his announcement later tonight. Taj Griffin from McEachin ranked as the top-ranked all-purpose back in the country. Heading into the season, but that injury, first game of the year, cut his senior season short. He will play for Oregon. Souths for Sites, Tyler LaFlame erupted for 435 yards rushing in a game earlier this year. He finished with nearly 1,500 yards rushing, 300 yards receiving, and 20 touchdowns. LaFlame is considering trying to walk on at Georgia Southern or Kennesaw State. As mentioned, Darius Slayton from Greater Atlanta Christian, he is heading to Auburn. DeAndre Walker from Langston Hughes will be playing at Georgia in Athens. And Rashad Roundtree from Lakeside will join Walker in Athens. In total, 7 of the top 16 players in our state were named as the Montlick & Associates Athlete of the Week. And joining us now is one of those honorees, Milton's Nick Wilson. Nick, congratulations, my man, on a fantastic season. You holding up? You having a good year?
Yes, sir.
All right. Good stuff. Congrats.
And Nick signed with Stanford. Now, you had offers from Auburn, Florida State, Michigan State, many of the biggest schools in the country. How did David Shaw and the staff at Stanford convince you that the farm was the right place for you?
Well, you know, I think the school really convinced itself. The kids there, the academics, and, you know, obviously the football is great. So, you know, having Coach Shaw there and just really added bonus to you know, the positives that Stanford presents to me. But yeah, just really helping. He's a great coach, leads by example, and a guy that I can really see myself play for. So,
give us a little insight into your recruiting process. Did you grow up a Stanford fan? How did they become on your radar? You know, obviously we're entrenched in the Deep South. You know, the SEC and ACC. But to get in that Pac-10 school, how did that become on your radar? And take us through how it all began.
Well, I actually grew up a huge Buckeye fan. My dad went to school at Ohio State, so my whole life I was raised, you know, to be a, you know, strict Buckeye fan. So that's all I had watched. And then one day I saw Stanford playing Oregon and how their offensive line was just so tenacious and, like, you know, just driving people off the ball, and that caught my eye. And I was like, wow, Stanford is pretty good. And then I heard about the academics, and I was like, wow, I want to go there someday. So, you know, I'm really happy it all worked out. And, you know, honestly, they weren't even on my radar until, like, a couple years ago. So,
can you confuse your dad between the Buckeye Reds and Cardinal Red, anything like that?
Yeah, yes, sir. Yeah. A little bit.
Now, I want to ask you, for that Stanford-Oregon memory, was Andrew Luck the quarterback at that time for Stanford?
Yes, sir, yeah.
So, and there have been a couple of Stanford offensive linemen that have now gone on to the NFL as well. The style of play, I guess Jim Harbaugh, of course, was the coach there before moving on to the 49ers, and then David Shaw. The style of play, how much did that attract you in terms of the way their offensive line plays? Because they're more of a throwback team. You have so many spread offenses now in college football. They're kind of a throwback smash mouth team.
That's exactly what drew me there. I'm kind of that way myself. You know, just getting after it, driving off the ball. Not a real pretty guy, but you know, I would just like to hit people, I guess, and you know, I think that's what they like to do.
That sounds pretty to a lot of coaches, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I think you look sharp, man. You got the jacket, the glasses. You're representing. Football always been a part of your life. You mentioned watching the Buckeyes as a kid, but something. Look at this guy right here. Who's that?
Oh, that's me.
Yeah, it is, man. Look at you. Ready to rock. You're playing running back right there. So you've changed a little bit over the years, but obviously it's been a huge, important factor of your life, the game of football.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it has. Started playing when I was 4 years old, and you know, it's the coaches, the players I've experienced throughout my life have, you know, really helped to shape who I am, and you know, help me become the football player and most of all the man I am. So really happy to play the sport and continue on to Stanford.
Nick Wilson all set to head to Palo Alto to become a member of the Stanford Cardinal. Our thanks to Nick. Nick, we appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be watching you closely as you vie for Pac-10 and national titles, or Pac-12, I should say.
Yeah, right.
Everything changes.
Yeah.
Pac-12 and national titles.
I call it Pac-10. We're still old school. He's a lot younger than us. Congratulations, man. Enjoy the moment. Safe travels out west.
Thank you very much.
All right, Wilson and other Montlick & Associates honorees will be following in the footsteps of the 2013's Athlete of the Year, Mr. Nick Ruffin. Ruffin signed with Auburn and made an immediate impact his freshman year. Auburn head coach Gus Malzahn noted Ruffin doesn't play like a freshman, and the thing that impressed him was that Ruffin was a physical guy that doesn't mind sticking his nose in there. He certainly did not on this hit against LSU. Wow. Ruffin spent considerable time at both the star position and the safety spot for the Tigers. Congrats and best of luck to all of our Montlick & Associates Athlete of the Week.
And still to come here on Sports Zone Signing Day, we are headed to Georgia Tech. Find out who signed today and what impact those players may have this year. That's when Sports Zone Signing Day rolls on.
I'm Van Earl Wright on the campus of Georgia Tech, and coming up, we'll let you hear from head coach Paul Johnson and why this was a drama-free signing day for the Yellow Jackets.
Sports Zone Signing Day is brought to you by Monlick & Associates, proud sponsor of the Monlick & Associates Athlete of the Week, profiling Georgia's top student athletes.
I'm only here so I won't get fined.
Wow, Paul Johnson showing a sense of humor. That's what happens when you win the Orange Bowl, I guess. Things definitely buzzing at Georgia Tech today. The Yellow Jacket fans are finding out which players will be calling Bobby Dodd Stadium home for the next 4 years. Welcome back, folks, to Sports Zone Signing Day. And what a year it was for those Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Of course, they beat Georgia, played in the ACC championship game, and we were down there in Miami when they won the Orange Bowl with that convincing 49-34 win over Mississippi State. Tech ended the season ranked 8th nationally in the final recruiting, or top 25 rankings, rather. A Washington County quarterback, A.J. Gray, rushed for 2,300 yards and 39 touchdowns and threw for 1,800 yards and 18 touchdowns running the spread offense. On defense, he had 10 interceptions. He was named the state's all-classification Player of the Year by the AJC. Speaking of the AJC, let's bring back in the recruiting blogger extraordinaire, Michael Carvel. Michael, good news for Tech is that A.J. Gray is headed there.
But Michael, his coach, openly complained that more schools weren't recruiting him. So what happened, and does Gray end up on offense or defense for Paul Johnson?
Yeah, you know, there's a running joke in the recruiting industry that when a kid commits to Georgia Tech, he loses 1 or 2 stars. And seriously, Tech recruits, when kids commit there, they get no respect, and they sign good players. I mean, obviously they had a good team this year, so those players, those 3 stars and 2 stars, somebody's doing a good job of scouting and evaluating players over there. And A.J. Green, what a diamond in the rough, played at Washington County. You know, they looked at him a little bit as a quarterback at first at Georgia Tech. Then they decided they wanted him to play defensive back, where his football future lies as far as if he wants to play professionally. But who knows? I mean, you know, Georgia Tech signed that other quarterback this year who was involved in a bad ATV accident. He may never be able to play again. So I get a feeling when they get to camp next year, if things don't work out, or if A.J. Gray maybe feels a little bit more comfortable in offense, yes, he could play quarterback for Georgia Tech, but he will be behind one of the best in the Southeast, and that's Justin Thomas. Wow, who, by the way, since we're on signing day, we got to remind people, he flipped from Alabama to Georgia Tech in 2012, guys.
That's right, and Justin Thomas still with 2 more years of eligibility, so if A.J. Gray wants to get on the field under center, he might have to wait a while. The Jackets did receive a big boost when North Gwinnett's Henry St. Amour pledged his allegiance to Tech last week. The defensive end, the Jackets' highest-ranked recruit from within the state, and he had considered Michigan State, Iowa, and Stanford. And he joins Gray at Tech, and so will Michael Lance Davis, who ran for more than 2,300 yards and 27 scores as a junior at Alexander High School. Now, his senior season, he actually missed 3 games, but still totaled nearly 4,300 yards rushing, 49 touchdowns over the course of his high school career. Lance Davis could contribute at B-back as a freshman. Greater Atlanta Christian's Tyler Cooksey announced on Father's Day that he would follow in his father's footsteps and play at Georgia Tech. His dad, Tom, played nose guard for the Jackets in the 70s. Today at GAC, the younger Cooksey made it official. Cooksey, a 6'3", 220-pound linebacker who figures to flourish in Ted Roof's system.
I committed to Georgia Tech on Father's Day, and it was just a very special time for us to be able to do all that, and for my dad and I to have that connection is something else. And I'm really happy that I'm going to be able to make him proud and play in the flats next year. So that's really the main reason.
Wow, what a cool moment for his father, and the entire family. That's awesome stuff. Now, for more on the newest group of Jackets, we head to the campus of Georgia Tech. Channel 2's Van Earl Wright spent the morning watching the national letters of intent come pouring in.
All right, thanks, guys. Here with Georgia Tech head coach Paul Johnson. They were just talking back in the studio about A.J. Gray and Mikel Lance Davis and Tyler Cooksey. Which of those 3 do you think might have the best chance at having an immediate impact for your football team?
Well, I don't know. I try not to single out anybody. We're excited about all 3 of those guys. I think they're all 3 great athletes and come from tremendous families. So, they're all going to get a chance to come in and contribute in the fall.
Pretty drama-free signing day. You started at 7 a.m. You were done by 9:45.
That's the way you like it. I think it speaks volumes to the job our staff did and to the type of young men that we're recruiting. They pretty much stayed true to their word, and we got what we expected this morning.
What kind of advantage do you have in the recruiting wars with the type of unique offense that you run?
Well, I think it gives people some niche positions to play, and certainly that certain talent levels fit the offense. But I think sometimes that's overblown a little bit both ways, the positive and the negative. The biggest issue that helps us is probably the quarterback, being able to recruit those guys who are high school quarterbacks who want a chance to play that position. And then if they can't, they can move here as well as they could some other school.
It's the best class you've had here?
I don't know. Time will tell. We'll see. They all came highly recommended.
Thank you for your time. Back to you guys.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. Let's get back now to Michael Carvel, live at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And Michael, we know Georgia Tech, Paul Johnson Company, a different approach to recruiting. Can you please explain how Georgia Tech sees things differently than other schools?
Yeah, you know, you hear all the time about how Georgia Tech and other schools can't get kids or can't recruit all the kids they want because of academics, but I just don't buy that. When I was back in Augusta, I covered this great basketball player, one of the best to ever come through Georgia, who was going to be ineligible as a senior. He ended up transferring to a prep school and then went to Duke and made great grades for 2 years. So what I'm trying to say here, if there's a will, there's a way, and I think if Georgia Tech really wants somebody, or Duke or whoever, they'll find a way to get them in somehow. And the other difference, which Paul Johnson touched on a little bit, there's people out there who say that they have to have specific personnel to fit their offense, and I agree with that. I mean, I don't think Justin Thomas can maybe play quarterback in a pro-style offense like Georgia, like Jacob Eason or Aaron Murray. So I think there's a little bit difference there, also with the offensive lineman, but not too much. I'm not buying all that.
You remember Justin Thomas wanted to go to, originally recruited by Alabama. They wanted him to play in the secondary. He said, no, I want to play quarterback. So Paul Johnson's like, hey, come to us. And all they did, DJ Shockley, as we welcome you back in, is finish 8th in the country. Beat your Bulldogs, so win the Orange Bowl. Paul Johnson trying to take that momentum and build off that with a great recruiting class. Do you think he's done enough with these group of guys to take that next step and maybe compete for a national championship here on the Flats? A little bit about a strong success building from what they've done in the last few months.
I think they can. You look at what they're bringing in. Obviously, we talked about some of the skill guys they got, but I think where Georgia Tech really wins is in the trenches. They are a hard-nosed football team, as we've seen this season. They took, obviously, we talked about they beat my Dogs, and they also took a very good Florida State team to the wire in a big Orange Bowl win. But they have the pieces in place to be very good and take that next step. Justin Thomas, we talked about, has 2 years left. He's only going to get better. His offense is starting to get better. They got guys like Miles Autry and C.J. Leckett who are in the wings ready to play. His defense showed up this season. They have the tools in place right now, I believe, especially with the recruiting class they're bringing in, to take that next step. And they showed this year they're right on the verge of being one of those teams that could play in that, big top four.
All right, let's take a look at a few of the other guys that Paul Johnson and the Jackets signed today. Dorian Walker rushing for 215 yards and 3 touchdowns in the state championship game this past season at the Georgia Dome for Mount Perrin Christian. He is a Yellow Jacket now. Brad Stewart played for Benedictine. They beat GAC for the state title this year. Michael Carvel noted, guys, that he was a wide receiver, one of the top, if not one of the best guys in the state to play a championship game this season. The Morgan brothers from Etowah, both playing and heading to Georgia Tech. They play on those lines. DJ mentioned how important it is to win the battle of the trenches at Georgia Tech. And Trent Sellers from Sandy Creek, he's heading to play for Paul Johnson as well. He is a defensive lineman. And that's just a few of the local kids headed to Georgia Tech this coming fall.
Yeah, in fact, Tech, of course, as we all know, offers its players a world-class education. But how much of a factor is that on signing day for high school players across the country? You heard Michael Carvel's take a moment ago.
Yeah, Michael, more on that. Let's bring you back in now here live on our show. You talk to many of these recruits, texting, trading messages with them all the time. How many of them truly consider their education? Can you give me some type of percentage?
Now, if you guys get me talking about Brad Stewart, this show may go 3 or 4 hours long. I think he's a great player, and I think he's probably the most underrated prospect in the state of Georgia, and he's going to Tech. He got the offer yesterday and committed and signed this morning. But to your question about education, I think it sounds good, and I think some kids think about it a little bit, but without a doubt, 100% of the reason these kids, in my opinion, pick a college is because of football, because they know if they can do well in football and reach the NFL, then whatever they could do as far as a degree or occupation, they can make that money, a career's worth of money in a few NFL seasons. So I think that's the number one reason. If not, you'd see these guys instead of committing to places like Duke and Florida, they'd be going to Harvard and Yale, because those schools, the Ivy Leagues, they can't offer football scholarships, but if they want you, they can offer you other scholarships where you can go for just about free. So that's my 2 cents.
It's a valid point and an honest assessment. And as we rejoined DJ Shockley, you had the opportunity, of course, to get a great education at the University of Georgia as well. But if you're being honest about this, as a high school senior, was your mind more on playing time and a possible NFL future, or was it on education mostly?
I think there's a little bit of both. Obviously, I have to be truthful. You want to play. Yes, you want to be a part of everything that goes on Saturday. But at the end of the day, I had people who instilled in me the importance of an education. And right now, coaches kind of say the same thing to these players, like, okay, if they are important, if they care about their academics, then they're going to care about learning this playbook. And then they can really get into the learning process of learning a playbook, learning the education, getting that. And it means most important to the coaches, because if they can't stay in school, then they won't do anything for them on the field. So it matters most to kids these days. And I think they have more people around them who tell them education comes first and everything else falls in line.
And you and I are, the three of us are all in NFL locker rooms all the time. You talk to those guys about the importance of education. We've seen a lot of guys who might have left early, but they're always going back to school, at least trying to get that education.
It's important, especially when you think about you being a role model for other kids. And guys leaving early, yeah, that's okay, you can do that. But at the end of the day, that degree is what's going to take you over once you leave the National Football League or leave college. That's what's going to matter most, is people going to say, this guy graduated and then he did this.
Here's another point, too. Malcolm Mitchell, DeAndre Smelter, both of them very, very good early in their careers. In terms of Mitchell, as a freshman, was a star. DeAndre Smelter this year, maybe he was leaning towards the NFL. Who knows? But maybe he was leaning towards that way. Tears his ACL in the last regular season game of the year at Georgia. Now, who knows? But if anything happens, if he doesn't move on and progress professionally the way that he hoped, has that Georgia Tech degree to fall back on. Absolutely. Not a bad option.
Yeah, one of the best in the country, and they can never take it away from him.
Exactly.
All right, stay with us, folks. When Sports Zone Signing Day returns, how do the SEC and ACC powers prevail on this National Signing Day? We'll show you their top recruits and discuss which local players will have the biggest impact at that next level.
All right, welcome back to Sports Zone Signing Day here on WSBTV.com. As you watch and listen, join in. Tweet us using the hashtag SZOne2 or go to our Sports Zone Facebook page to see more videos from today's signing.
Yeah, the state's second-ranked recruit actually announced where he was headed on National Signing Day last year. And had no great surprise that the state's top offensive lineman, North Gwinnett's Mitch Hyatt, said he was going to Clemson. He has family ties to the school. Hyatt enrolled at Clemson in January and will have the opportunity to go through spring practices. And don't be surprised to see him blocking for another Georgia product, Gainesville quarterback Deshaun Watson, next season. Here's a look at some of Clemson's other recruits from the state of Georgia. Shadell Bell is a wide receiver who played at Columbia and Decatur. Zach Gilella is an offensive tackle from Augusta Christian. Austin Bryant, a weak side defensive end from Thomas County Central. All of them going to join Mitch Hyatt at Clemson this coming year.
And you know what? Lovejoy's Preston Williams helped make the Tennessee volunteer recruiting class one of the best in the SEC. It's a top 5 class according to some. It's the 6'5" wideout. Williams dominated at times last season. He's ranked as the 6th best player in the state and one of the top receivers in the entire country, though he did get hurt near the end of his senior season. You'll love this. Williams, also a model. One interesting story, he reportedly was asked to leave an official visit to Auburn early after showing up in bright orange gear and trying to convince other recruits to join him at Tennessee.
Nice.
Yeah. Who else is headed to Rocky Top? A pair of Buford teammates are headed to Tennessee. Outside linebacker Austin Smith and defensive tackle Quay Piku. Outside linebacker Cortez Sapp from Milton will be a volunteer. And Micah Abernathy headed to Tennessee too. He is set to play cornerback. Micah Abernathy at Greater Atlanta Christian met him this morning, and very good player. He's also going to play alongside Ralph Abernathy IV, who follows Butch Jones from Cincinnati down to Knoxville.
Very cool.
For the first time, those two will get a chance to play together.
Nice.
Yeah, so Michael Carvel, both Hyatt and Williams were big stars in high school. Will we be saying the same thing about their college careers?
Yeah, in my opinion, there are 2 guys in the state of Georgia for 2015 who will be in the NFL. That's Westover defensive tackle Trent Thompson. You've already talked about him. Then the other guy is North Gwinnett's Mitch Hyatt, who is going to Clemson. I mean, he's got the frame, the size to play in the NFL. His uncle played for Clemson in the NFL. He's going there. As far as Preston Williams, You've already talked about him a little bit. He's a boomer bust guy to me. He's high risk, high reward. I think he's going to be he could be a superstar, or he could be a guy that, who knows what. I mean, there's never a boring moment with Preston. All I can say is, for one thing sure about him, is that there will never be a boring moment in Rocky Top with Preston Williams around for the sports writers. I can promise you that.
He loves him some Preston, man. All good. He's got some swag. It's kind of like you back in the day, huh?
Yeah, and he has a quarterback from the area too that'll be throwing on the ball, Joshua Dobbs from Alpharetta High School in Tennessee Orange as well. So that could be a dangerous duo in the coming years.
Without question. You know, year in and year out, the Alabama Crimson Tide produced one, if not the top recruiting class in the country, and they do it in part with Georgia talent. This year, no different, folks. Central Gwinnett's Adonis Thomas heads to Tuscaloosa. The outside linebacker was an Under Armour All-American and named the Gwinnett County Linebacker of the Year. He's to be joined by a few players from the state of Georgia. Micah Brown is an outside linebacker from Columbus. Dallas Warmack is a guard who helped Mace to the state championship game. He has already enrolled in Alabama. They are joined by five-star and the nation's top quarterback, Blake Barnett. He is from California. And Kendall Simmons is another five-star recruit. He is a cornerback from the state of Texas.
Meanwhile, the Auburn Tigers won a national championship with one Georgia quarterback, Westlake's Cam Newton. And the Tigers return to the title game with another in Wilcox County's Nick Marshall. This year, another quarterback from the Peach State headed to Auburn. North Copp's Tyler Queen was Auburn's first verbal commitment for this year's class. He gave that nearly 2 years ago and never wavered. Queen enrolled early and is already on campus on the Plains. Tigers must replace Nick Marshall next season. So here's a look at who will join Queen at Auburn. Caleb Kim may be blocking for Queen in the future. He's an offensive lineman from Mill Creek. Also Montavious Atkinson, a linebacker from Langston Hughes. Bailey Sharp is a tackle from Sprayberry, the Yellow Jackets. And Auburn landed one of the top players in the country in Byron Cowart. In some people's estimation, the #1 player. He is from Florida and chose the Tigers over the Gators.
All right, some local talent now. Another one of the state's top players is headed out of state to play at the next level. Sandy Creek's Eric Swinney will play for Hugh Freeze and Ole Miss. Swinney pretty much had his choice of schools after averaging 141 yards per game on the ground his senior season. He scored nearly 70 touchdowns in his career for one of the top programs in our state.
And joining us right now is the aforementioned Eric Swinney. So, Eric, first of all, thanks for joining us. You had offers from Alabama, Georgia, Florida State, Ohio State. The list goes on and on. What exactly convinced you to go to the Suspenders and join Hugh Freeze and company at the Grove in Oxford?
You know, just Ole Miss. Ever since I went there my first visit, I just fell in love with it. It's just a different type of feel there. You know, just a family environment. How like the coaches, like they bring their families around all the time. You just see their families every time you go up there. I just really love that about that, and I'm a big guy on family, so that's one of the big reasons for going to Ole Miss.
As Anthony mentioned, you could have gone anywhere in the country, one of the top players in our state, one of the top 10 running backs in the country. When did the recruiting process start for you, where you go from maybe a letter or two, Eric, and then all of a sudden you can fill your bathtub full of recruiting letters, text messages, and so on?
It was just a big thing for me, you know. Recruiting just got really hectic. I think it was my 10th grade year going into my 11th grade year. Recruiting was just a lot, you know, but like I said, it just basically came down to family and everything. So
let me ask you this, because we don't often get a chance to ask you guys face to face. What's the worst, or the most annoying, I should say, part of recruiting? Because I mean, many people they see the glory, the glorified parts of it, receiving the letters and feeling wanted by so many different schools and coaches and teams. But what's the most annoying part of recruiting that you wish was never part of the process?
I really wouldn't say it was annoying that much, but probably the most annoying thing would be getting pulled out of class all the time.
Pulled out for what?
Just talk to the college coaches and everything when they come by the school. But it was pretty enjoyable recruiting process, but I loved everything about my recruiting process.
I know you're big on social media. It's important to the kids these days. It's important to us. But there can be some trolls out there that try to get you. Do you pay attention to that? Do you try to block it, ignore it when you got fans from Miss, Georgia, Georgia Tech? You know, fans say, hey, come to our school. Don't be going to Ole Miss. We want you to stay closer to home. How does that work with the social media aspect of recruiting these days?
Yeah, you can block that out. You know, it depends on how you take it. You could take it as, I could just roll with this and just build on it, or you could take it as, hey, I don't want to be like that. So you can build on that, or you just take it and roll with it.
All right, so Eric, right now I'm sure there's some sophomores and juniors watching on WSBTV.com. They're in class. They're supposed to be listening to what the teacher's saying, but somewhere
they got
they're
their
watching
phone
us.
out,
That's
right?
right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So if there's one piece of advice that you would give to those who are watching or who will hear about this later about the recruiting process, what advice would that be?
Just take your time with it. Make sure you are comfortable and you know that's the place you want to be in the recruiting process. Don't pick the school for its name or what it did in the past. Pick the school for what you feel is best for you and your family, and just stay humble.
Hotty Toddy, is that what they?
Yes, sir. Hotty Toddy.
Right. Eric Swinney at Ole Miss, a future Ole Miss Rebel. We look forward to watching you as you continue your career in the SEC.
Congratulations, man. Enjoy the moment, and we'll see you soon. All right, much more to get to, folks. McEachern High School boasting two of the top-ranked recruits in Georgia and the nation this past season, and both are headed out west to play. 6'3", 280-pound offensive lineman Chuma Edoga was the third-ranked player in the state, was named second-team All-USA by USA Today, and he was a dominant force for the high-powered McEachern offense. Edoga decided to head out west, signing with Southern Cal. He's an early enrollee and already at the school.
Wow. His teammate, running back Taj Griffin, also headed to the West Coast, the Pacific Northwest to be exact. Griffin will play for the national champion runner-up Oregon Ducks. Michael Carvel noted Griffin ran a faster 40 time than all but one running back at the 2014 NFL Scouting Combine. He is that fast, folks. Combine that with his elusiveness, and it's no wonder he was ranked as the top all-purpose back in the country heading into his senior year. However, he did suffer a torn ACL in the season opener. Griffin has already enrolled in Eugene, Oregon. All right, so Michael, in Edoga and Griffin, you're talking about two of the best players not only in this state but in the entire country, yet they ventured clear across the country. How come?
Yeah, first of all, let me say this. The state of Georgia produces 200 Division I signees every signing day. So Georgia Tech and Georgia, they can't get them all. Two they did not get this year, as you mentioned, were Chuma and Taj. And Chuma is the first guy we'll talk about. I thought he was the best offensive lineman in the state of Georgia after Mitch Hyatt. He went to L.A. or to USC. Big reason there was because his aunt lives out there. So there was a family connection, and that proved to be the winning factor over Georgia. Taj Griffin, sort of a funny, not funny, but a crazy story there. His brother played quarterback for Georgia Tech. He was reserve last year. He transferred in the offseason, and Oregon gave his brother a football scholarship. So that was a little bit of a package deal there. But Taj, what can you say? He's a five-star talent. The thing that people worry about him is that he has durability problems. He's gotten hurt the last couple seasons. This year, everybody knows he missed his whole senior season after an ACL injury in the season opener. And with guys like that who depend on their game for speed and explosiveness, you got to wonder how he's going to be able to come back and plant with those knee stuff. So we'll see, but we're hoping for the best.
All right, Michael, thank you. We bring back in DJ Shockley. Edoga, 6'3", 280 pounds. That's a load up front. And obviously Taj Griffin, before the injury, one of the fastest players in the country. Of these two, who do you see having the more prolific college career?
It's tough to tell because there are a lot of guys who can do a lot of great things. I'm going to stay in the trenches, which is kind of weird to say that, but I think Mitch Hyatt has a huge upside to him. I think he has the ability. He's played against some of the best in not only high school right now, he's going to play against some of the best in college, and he's done that already. He went against Lorenzo Carter. He's run against Robert Nkadiche, who's at Ole Miss, who's done a great job. Mitch Hyatt has all the tools right now to be one of the best, I believe, not only just in the state as he has been, but also in the country. He has all the tools. He uses his hands well, uses his feet really well. He stays in front, and he's a pretty aggressive, has an edgy blocker to it. So I like Mitch Hyatt to have probably one of the best careers because he's going to go in. He's going to play early, and he's a technician already. It's not a lot you can teach him. Smart kid. I think he's going to do a good job.
Yeah, we've had a chance to see him up close on one of our Sports Zone Friday night games of the week, talking to him in person on the sidelines. A big kid, smart kid, and he really understands the nuances of the game, doesn't he?
And that's what you usually don't get out of offensive line. They understand, okay, I got to block the guy in front of me. That's it. Talking to Mitch Hyatt, you understand he understands coverages, he understands blitzes, he understands how you have to reach guys to make sure you cut off the block. He does a lot of the small things, the details that coaches are really going to pay attention to that's going to make him special. And you see a lot of guys in the National Football League or who are top 5 picks who are offensive linemen, and he can be one of those guys.
Mitch Hyatt heading to Clemson, one of the best prospects without a doubt in our nation. So, folks, we've been watching recruiting rankings all day, and they will change as players commit formally, including Terry Godwin. But here's how some experts see it factoring in who has already signed and who they anticipate to sign with each school throughout the day. All right, here, folks. Top recruiting classes, Alabama at 1. No surprise there. Nick Saban continues to roll in Tuscaloosa. As for number 2, the Tennessee Volunteers. DJ making a surprise move up the rankings, don't you think?
It is. That is very interesting, but Tennessee's done a good job.
LSU coming in at number 3 as we take a look at the top 5 recruiting classes. Les Miles always doing great wonders. Signing day, he's always on the phones. USC, Southern Cal, rounding out the top 4. Bama, Tennessee, LSU, Southern Cal, look at the top 4 early rankings for the national recruiting classes. As we move on, take a look at how things are unfolding on the national scene. Ohio State coming off that national championship. Urban Meyer, you know, when he texts an athlete out there, say, hey, guys, who's the defending champs? Oh, that's right, the Buckeyes. Why don't you come there? Florida State, they won it 2 years ago. Jimbo Fisher doing a great job on the recruiting trail. And how about Gus Malzahn, the Auburn? Man, they're moving up the rankings as well. Georgia, another top 10 recruiting class for Mark Richt and the Bulldogs. As we now welcome in Michael Carvel. Carvel, he's one of your favorite guys without a doubt. We're talking about Nick Saban. How does he do this year after year? Playing time, always such a big deal when you factor in the kids and the high school decision wanting to play on Saturdays, but Saban gets some of the best at every position every year. How does he do this? And what do you think of Auburn's class as well?
Yeah, I was on Twitter this morning, and some people they've nicknamed National Signing Day as Nick Saban Day. What can you say about the Alabama coach? Year after year after year, they finish with the #1 class. And you got to wonder, what are these kids thinking? Do they actually look at the depth chart? Because Alabama has some special ability or force to convince 3 or 4 running backs or linebackers that they're going to be the starter next year. All 4 of them at the same time. They just recruit right over them, and it's like a spell that Coach Saban cast upon these kids, and it just works. And, of course, you know, winning speaks volumes too, and Alabama is the top program in the SEC. So another great job by Nick Saban.
Yep, year in and year out, Mr. Saban does it on signing day. Speaking of signing day, much more here live on WSBTV.com, our Sports Zone signing day. When we come back, we're going back in time. Herschel Walker did not want to go to Georgia. Where did he want to go, and what changed his mind? He sat down with our Anthony Amy and explains when we come back.
Sports Zone Signing Day is brought to you by Monlick & Associates, proud sponsor of the Monlick & Associates Athlete of the Week, profiling Georgia's top student athletes.
That's how you look at me.
Welcome back. One of us, a very highly recruited quarterback coming out of North Clayton High School. The other two.
You mean the one that was talking?
Yeah.
Coming out of break?
The other two, we didn't go to North Clayton High School, right? We didn't do that. TJ Shockley, one of the top quarterbacks coming out of the high school nationally. Take us back to, you know, seems like 30 years ago, right?
Really? You're going to do me
That's
like
the
that?
gray hair,
30
man,
years?
something like that.
I'm only 31, but it's all right. Yeah. I had an interesting recruiting time. It was a time when Coach Richt was still at Florida State at the time, and I sat there at the team gala. I'm sitting at his table, and he's telling me how great Florida State is. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm really into Florida State. Florida State is all great. And then I started thinking about, okay, well, a week later, he takes the job at the University of Georgia. The day he takes the job at the University of Georgia, he's sitting in my living room, and he's telling me how great University of Georgia. I said, Coach, you just say how great Florida State was. So it was a pretty funny story at the time. But at the end of the day, I wanted to play for Coach Richt. You look at his track record. You look at all the quarterbacks he's had. I mean, Chris Winkie and Charlie Ward, 2 Heisman quarterbacks, 2 different type of quarterbacks. But I knew he could coach each type of quarterback. So I was all about that.
Look at you in this old black and white video from back in the day.
Very grainy.
Making some kids miss.
Very grainy, but you get the picture, though.
I do get the picture. What's the one biggest thing that has changed from your recruiting days, just a few years ago, to 2015? The one thing.
It's easily the social media part of it.
Really?
I mean, it's so easy for these coaches to get to the players. There's all the camps. There's Twitter. There's Instagram. There's so many things that they can acknowledge and get to the kids, and they can promote the kids. It's so much bigger now than it was when I played.
And what 17, 18-year-old kid doesn't want to see these schools reaching out to him on these social media? It makes him feel big.
He already sounds rickety. It's so much bigger than when I played. Right?
He's getting old, man.
No HD TV back then, the grainy video.
We got to grow up, man. Come on, we got to grow up.
That's true. That we do.
Some of us. And speaking of big-time Georgia recruits, it turns out the Bulldogs' biggest get ever, Herschel Walker, didn't even want to play football in Athens. Really, the Johnson County High School star wanted to head out of state.
I have a great appreciation for the University of Georgia. And, you know, I didn't want to go. I was going to the military. I wanted to go everywhere else except the University of Georgia. But I'm going to tell all the kids in the state of Georgia, all the kids in their state, sometimes it's good to go to your home university. And the only reason I say that is, you know, when something happened in your life, you got to have something to fall back on. And no matter what I've done, the state of Georgia has supported me. They've been behind me, and I can always come back home. And that makes a big, big difference. And that's why I have a lot of appreciation for Georgia.
Coming up next, folks, as we look ahead and back on our Sports Zone signing day spectacular, one man took Herschel's advice and stayed close to home. What did Nick Chubb have to say last year on signing day? To our Anthony Amy, we'll take a look back at that.
Can't believe that was just a year ago. And we're checking out how Kennesaw and Georgia State did today as well. Sports Zone signing day returns in exactly 1 minute.
When Kennesaw State takes to the field for its inaugural season in 2015, the team will feature plenty of local talent. So who did they sign today? E.J. Hurley, an offensive lineman from Sandy Creek High School. Kingsley Ejike from Covington. He played at UAB and is a defensive lineman. Dustin Moore is from Conyers and played for Kent State, where he was a defensive end. Darnell Holland played for Bowdoin. He can play several positions this year for the Owls.
All right. Meanwhile, Georgia State's mission a little bit different. The Panthers won just one game last season and have only 3 wins in the last 3 years. So head coach Trent Miles and his team are finally looking forward to that hard work paying off. So Georgia State recruited more junior college players this year, all but 5 thus far from JUCO. The local high school players include Chase Middleton, a linebacker from Brookwood. Penny Hart is a wideout from Kings Ridge. Aaron Winchester, quarterback from Mount Pisgah. And Marquand Green is a wide receiver from the state champions, the Colquitt County Packers.
We went heavy juniors, and we signed 8 junior college players, but 2 of those have 3 to play 3. They're really sophomores. And then we add in the 6 UAB players, and then you add 3 young men that we signed last year that didn't start school until this January, which are gray shirts. So that's 17 young men that we brought in. So 99% of our football team is already here, going through winter conditioning, going through spring football. We'll only bring in 4 or 5 guys on this signing day that are high school players that will join us in the summertime.
Well, up next here on Sports Zone signing day, 2 Georgia high school players who were in the same position just last year will figure into the Heisman Trophy race. We'll take a very recent trip back down memory lane coming up next.
On National Signing Day a year ago, Anthony made his way to Cedartown, Georgia to interview the state's top running back. He had put up impressive numbers in high school, but some experts wondered if that was because he played against a weaker competition. That player was current Georgia Bulldog running back Nick Chubb. Chubb averaging 244 yards per game his senior season. He scored 41 touchdowns, and that success continued, of course, as we know, at Georgia. Chubb used sparingly in Georgia's first 5 games as a freshman and then showed flashes of brilliance. But when Todd Gurley suspended, Chubb took over. The former Cedartown Bulldog amassed over 1,500 yards, averaged 7.1 yards per carry, and scored 14 touchdowns for Georgia this last year. Here's a look back at what he told Anthony a year ago.
What are your expectations as you head to Athens as a true freshman?
I mean, true freshman, it'll be hard, but, you know, they showed that they'll play the best running back. You know, I'm all for that. I'll go in and give my best, and hopefully I can get some playing time.
Getting some playing time, obviously, you're going to have, you know, a couple of studs in front of you, and Todd Gurley and Keith Marshall, both of whom should be 100% healthy by the time fall comes around. What's your mindset as you go in knowing that you have excellent running backs, you know, with good resumes there that are going to be, you know, in all likelihood in front of you on the depth chart?
I mean, that's a good thing. That's how I look at it. I can go and learn from those guys. They're both very good running backs, and I can learn a lot from them and take what they have, and apply it to myself and become a better running back for me.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, he says a year ago, I'm just hoping I can get some playing time.
Just get me on the field maybe for a few plays.
Yeah, he ends up the last game of the year, 266 yards rushing, an all-time Georgia Bowl record, and over 1,500 yards as a freshman. Meanwhile, Gainesville's Deshaun Watson was the state's top quarterback recruit a year ago. Pretty easy to understand why. Yeah. Watson totaled 13,000 passing yards, 4,000 rushing, and an unbelievable 217 touchdowns as a Gainesville Red Elephant. And he chose Clemson. As a true freshman, Watson started the season as a backup. It was simply too good for Dabo Swinney to keep off the field. Ended up with 1,400 yards passing, 14 scores, despite missing time due to a knee injury. All right, and we welcome back former Georgia quarterback DJ Shockley. DJ, both Chubb and Watson, very impressive seasons as true freshmen. Are both of them viable Heisman Trophy candidates as sophomores?
Easily, because you look at what their team needs. Their team needs both of them in a major way. You look at Chubb, they're going to be dependent upon him to carry the load a lot. He did a lot for them last season. They're going to be bringing in a new quarterback, whoever that may be. They're going to need Chubb to carry the load for them. And Deshaun Watson, on the other end, he showed flashes this year. He made that team better. And at the quarterback position, he's going to have every single chance to touch that football every single play and make some plays with it. And that Clemson team is just better with him at the helm. And both those guys have the opportunity, and they're going to have a prime time setup to be able to show people why they should be playing or why they should be, in that Heisman race.
I remember even going back to the season opener against Georgia in Athens. True freshman, first college football game. The Clemson offense had done nothing.
Big spark, yeah.
And then he comes in and they score like that.
I remember Georgia people saying, I hope he doesn't come back in because he played so well. He didn't look like a true freshman. He was just so poised, and you can see certain guys just have that it factor, and both those guys have it about him.
Without a question. I remember he committed, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but to Clemson, I think after his sophomore year.
Early,
so he was early. He was an early enrollee, always preparing, always studying film. Sky's the limit for him.
And, here's the thing about quarterbacks these days. They're getting taught so many different things early.
Right.
They get to go all these different camps. They get all these. He went to the Manning camp. They do a lot of different things now that prepare them so that when they step into college,
they're good,
ready
to go.
They're
not using that freshman year or that redshirt year to get caught up.
Absolutely.
They already know what's going in.
Absolutely.
All right, now that National Signing Day, folks, are nearly in the books for this 2015 year, let's take a quick look forward at some of the players we'll be talking about next season. We start with big Julian Rochester.
He is big.
Man! He's 17 years old. Currently listed as the #1 recruit in Georgia for 2016. He's 6'5.5 inches. Got to give him that half inch. 300 pounds. He plays defensive tackle for McEacher. We saw him several times this season on WSBTV.com in our Game of the Week. Truly a man among boys. He has offers from the country's elite programs and has made unofficial visits to Georgia, Auburn, Alabama, and Florida State, among other programs. The nation's #1 recruit at tight end in 2016 class played for Buford this past year, but his father has a new job in Florida. That's Isaac Nauta, so he's headed south. He enrolled at the IMG Academy, where he'll line up at the state of Florida's #2 player overall. Nauta already verbally committed to Florida State, but as we've seen today, verbal commitments not really stand for much.
I couldn't hear you a whole lot, Zach. Vanderbilt was screaming in my ear. But also, in case you missed it this season, Evander Holyfield's son, Elijah, making a pretty good name for himself. His dad was the real deal in the ring. Elijah dishes out blows to would-be tacklers as a running back. The Woodward Academy star has early offers from Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, and dozens of other schools. Holyfield burst onto the scene this past season, scoring 7 touchdowns in one game, and he continued racking up impressive performances throughout the year, even helping the War Eagles snap Sandy Creek's 44-game region win streak, which spanned 7 years. Hopefully Eric Swinney is gone and doesn't have any bad memories from that night.
That's right. All right. But that was looking ahead to 2016. Let's wrap up 2015. It's been a crazy few days again this year. Let's talk some final thoughts.
Let's start with DJ. What do you think? Nick Chubb, Deshaun Watson a year ago. Give us a player or two from the state to keep an eye on for the upcoming season. Who might make their mark as a true freshman this season?
There's a guy that's going to Georgia. We talked about him when we first started, in Trent Thompson, big defensive lineman from Westover High School, has all the ability, has all the size, the strength, the speed, he has all the ability, the intangibles that everybody talks about to be a next-level guy. We talked about how Georgia's losing some key guys up front in that middle. He can be the guy up front who can really have a huge role this season and make a major impact for the Dogs coming in early.
Always a few surprises on signing day. Anthony, let's start with you. What was the big surprise in your eyes today?
The biggest one for me, I guess, Darius Slayton. I mean, before last night, everybody thought he would be a Bulldog, and all of a sudden now he's going to Auburn. to play for Gus Malzahn and going there to play receiver, as he indicated to me this morning. So he's just one of those, DJ and I were talking about him, he's one of those guys that just looks the part. I mean, you see him in this video, he just looks like an athlete.
Well, when I watch film on him, he's smooth in his route, he's crisp, he runs, he has an edge about him, he's a little emotional out there.
But like you said, he's smooth.
Yeah.
Smooth is the one adjective.
And when you talked with him this morning, did you sense that he was comfortable, at peace with his decision?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so. I mean, he's a calm, cool guy anyway. So, I mean, even if he wasn't, he wouldn't let on.
Right.
But, yeah, he's completely happy with it. Had all types of Auburn gear there. And you can look forward to big things, I think, from that young man in that Gus Malzahn offense next year.
What about you, DJ? Biggest surprise today?
I think Slayton had to be for me as well. I mean, everybody talked about him going to Georgia, watched the film on him. I thought I was pretty excited to see him, and then hit her news last night. I just couldn't get over how good he was. And I thought he was going to be a huge for the Dogs because they needed some receivers. But him going to Auburn, it's going to be a big pickup for them. So that was the biggest one for me is Slayton going there, and so it's going to be big for him.
Real quick, biggest surprise for me, no live animals this year.
No.
Isaiah Crowell,
Props,
no puppies,
right?
no alligators, no pigs. It was that was the biggest surprise.
Also Raekwon Smith, UCLA.
Yeah.
Right.
I will say, too, also school-wide, in terms of a team, not just for one player, Tennessee.
Yeah.
And to be,
making a
push. As of right now, the number 2
making
class, Butch Jones, making some noise. So that SEC East is going to be a barn burner in 2015.
All right, folks, that's going to do it for this edition of Sports Zone Signing Day, brought to you by our friends at Mottlick & Associates, for DJ Shockley, Michael Carvel, and also the fantastic crew behind the scenes, Laura Reed, Justin Reed, Nelson Hicks, a cast of thousands. Thank you so much for putting this spectacular on today. Please check out our Sports Zone Facebook page, and on Twitter, you can hit us up at @SZON2 for latest and greatest signing updates throughout the day. Thanks again for joining us live on WSBTV.com. We'll see you tonight at 6 on the Channel 2 Action News. Have a great rest of the day, folks.